Thank you, Amar. Good morning. Wow, the room's filled up. It was almost empty when I walked in.
Must be you.
No, I wish. Before Mukund gives me a hard time, I should just tell him that this is not my normal uniform. I don't normally wear suits, but today I decided to. So, those of you looking in the agenda and see Anupam Pahuja, I am not Anupam Pahuja, as you saw. So, we have a similar hairstyle, but that's about where it stops. He's my colleague from who runs PayPal in India, PayPal Development Center, but unfortunately he had a family situation that he couldn't be here. So, what I want to talk about, and I know there's been a lot talked about. I think it's been a fantastic 3 days, and I'm looking forward to the rest of today as well. I think this conference just gets better every year. I mean, this is one of the best conferences in India, in my opinion. And I think it's just, I know Ravi's got great plans to make it even better, right? So, I think one of the things that as I've sat through the sessions and the workshops on the first day, yesterday morning's plenary and the afternoon's plenary, etc., the thing that kind of jumps out at me is the word cloud. I don't know about you, but I hear so much stuff. There's so much being shared. There is so much of positive, ideas. There's so much of success stories, there's so much of gyan, right? When I look at all of that and I go, okay, fantastic stuff, but what do I do with it? And if you're like me and I'm sitting here wondering, what does this mean to me? How do I take away? What is my takeaway out of this? So what I want to spend time today is really talk about, I've had the good fortune of working for 3 different companies in India now in my last 8 years here, after moving back from the US, and I have to spend time on building 3 different strategies, looking at India from 3 different business models. And what that has given me is a framework that I've started using, and I hope that it's useful to all of you as well when you think about this. Because going from that, whole bunch of ideas and opportunities which are in billions. I mean, yesterday Rajan kind of talked about, billion-dollar valuations. These don't come simply, right? There's opportunity, then there's addressable opportunity, then there's a strategy, then there's execution, and then there is trial and error, and then you probably will get to that valuation. So the thing is, what trends are relevant? How do you think about relevancy, right? The human mind can only accept so much input, right? Can only look at so many different things, so many different variables. So one of the things that I've looked at, and I've kind of tested this model out with others as well, is to say, okay, what is the key things, the key relevant independent variables that you want to look for that will let me get to the addressable opportunity? It's useful to know that you have 1.3 billion population in India, right? It's interesting information, right? But is it really actionable information? Probably not. I think you really want to get down to the fact that you want to understand which of those 1.3 billion people are really relevant to you as an entrepreneur when you're looking to build a business. It's nice to know that there are over 500 million mobile phones in India, or it may get to 600, 700 million. What do you do with that information? How do you intersect these kinds of pieces of information that are coming in and actually do this? So what I'm going to walk through is essentially looking at consumer India, consumer opportunities, and looking at trends and saying, how do you marry these 2 things and make some sense out of it so that you can actually build a business around it? So the first thing is young population, right? We all know that this number has been touted for many years. 50% of the population, 500 million people less than the age of 35. What does that mean? What's the relevancy of this? One, very aspirational. This young population, it doesn't matter, and we have done these studies, and I've had the opportunity to do this, visit homes. Where you go, it doesn't matter whether you're in Bangalore, or in Allahabad, or you're in Lucknow, or you're Coimbatore. There's a certain amount of aspirational value that comes with being young. These are up and coming, they want a better job, they want a better life, they want better education, they want more money. And at a very young age. And that leads to frustration. So I think, what Vivek talked about in terms of Janagraha and organizations like these can give vent to some of these things that happen. But how do you turn a problem into an opportunity? Second thing, they're very trendy, right? I mean, those of us who have teenage kids, you know that they are huge influencers in terms of purchasing decisions. How do you tap into that? The third thing is techno-savvy, right? I mean, just think about kids, right? They're, my son kicks my ass in Xbox. He doesn't want to play with me anymore, right? By the time I'm done, he's scored 15 goals on me. And that's, that's top of the pyramid, but if you go down, the same things exist. They're techno-savvy. And they're early adopters. These are the kids. Facebook adoption in India was driven by that age group. We talk about it, ComScore doesn't even track that age group. But we know the amount of usage that happens, right? They're early adopters. So the young population, what is the opportunity? What is the relevancy of that? How do we think about this? The geographic shift, internet penetration into the heartland of India. What is the opportunity that it's bringing up? Vernacular language that was talked about yesterday, right? We need to go beyond English. The things got a little bit messed up, but reach, right? Reach into the heartland of India. What is the implication? If I'm an e-commerce company like I'm part of, right, how do I get goods to them? How do I able to deliver it? The problem for them is not spending power, right? Sometimes there's a misnomer that people who are in the heartland of India don't have spending power. They have spending power. The question is availability. They don't have the malls that they can walk into to buy stuff. They can't do comparison shopping. So they go online, right? If you talk to the e-commerce companies, they'll tell you this is one of the fastest growing areas. But it's fraught with all kinds of large problems that are begging to be solved, right? Logistics, payments, delivery, all kinds of stuff, right? Huge opportunities. But again, mapping a trend to something that is actually, an implication, and then bringing that one level down to saying what is the problem set that need to be solved, understanding that. The third one, and these are the three trends I look at, is socio-economic shift. There are 45 million people in India who use the internet without knowing they're using the internet. They use the telcos portals. They go in and they consume entertainment content, sports scores. They click a button and something happens. They may not know that it's actually internet underneath that's actually powering the whole thing. They just know that they're watching a video or listening to a sound clip or something or music. But that will change, right? As these semi-smart phones start to take off, internet penetration starts to take off, telcos bring down the cost of access. That's going to change the implication of what happens. Again, a shift, a large trend, big opportunity as you can paint it, a set of implications that it generates. What does it mean? Now, the interesting part is if you put all these three things together, these are three independent variables. But if you put them together, a more interesting picture starts to emerge. If you look at the intersection of the three axes, if you think about it from the age, geographic, and socioeconomic, internet in India started off at the pivot point because it was really adults in urban markets with spending power who started using the internet. Hence, yes, when Sanjeev talked yesterday about building Naukri.com, that's really the demographics that they were going after. But as you start to move out, and the internet has now, we are well past that stage now. We're probably 13, 14 years into the internet journey in India. It's no longer a two-dimensional problem or even a one-dimensional problem. It's a three-dimensional problem. And I'm deliberately not introducing more dimensions because we can't grasp it, we can't visualize it without Hadoop, right? So we can certainly do that. That's a separate topic on big data, and we can talk about those aspects of it. But for the human mind to build simple models that we can grasp and actually build a strategy around, for you and I, more than three dimensions starts to become a problem. So now the question is, which dimension do you want to work in? It's a three-dimensional problem. So let me illustrate, right? If I want to go after the rural market, bottom of the pyramid, and young people, what's the solution I'm going to build? And how am I going to test that out? So I'm not going to go down deeper into the next levels of the next stages of this. Of course, it's a stairway, right? It's a stairway to heaven, where the heaven is the billion-dollar valuation. And we start at the bottom of the stairs, which is where the opportunity is. But if I were an entrepreneur, and I think like an entrepreneur, not because I build a company, but because I have to do the same thing for a larger company. And ultimately, it's a dollar that's being invested. It doesn't matter whether it's a small company or large company. We have to build a strategy, and we have to take a chance. There's risks involved. The payoffs will happen down the road. You have to go convince. In my case, I had to go convince all kinds of people in all kinds of countries that, take a bet on India, right? And you have to convince the same thing to your investors. So you need to build a model that is logical, that makes sense, and be able to communicate it really well. So I leave you with this, and I think I was glad. Actually, let me slow to my last slide. I was glad Brad kind of talked about what role eBay can play, and I think a lot of my team members are here, and we are happy to engage. Right? We are willing to bring our whatever little knowledge we have to the table. My Twitter handle and my email are up there. If you're interested in continuing the conversation, I'm more than happy to do it. And I'm more than committed to helping people out if they want to talk about it. And I learn through that process as well. So I think it's a two-way street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. We have time for a couple of questions. First one, right there. Go ahead. So let me ask you a question, Ram. So looking at eBay and its Indian strategy, I know you're basically in the two different businesses, right? So how do you reconcile the payments versus your auction business and so on and so forth? And how do these people kind of figure out how they navigate through your organization?
So there are two things, right? Thank you. There are two pieces to this. One is the product strategy and the work that we do out of our development. There's, payoffs will happen down the road. You have to go convince. In my case, I had to go convince all kinds of people in all kinds of countries that, take a bet on India, right? And you have to convince the same thing to your investors. So you need to build a model that is logical, that makes sense, and be able to communicate it really well. So I leave you with this, and I think I was glad. Actually, let me slow to my last slide. I was glad Brad kind of talked about what role eBay can play, and I think a lot of my team members are here, and we are happy to engage, right? We are willing to bring our whatever little knowledge we have to the table. My Twitter handle and my email are up there. If you're interested in continuing the conversation, I'm more than happy to do it. And I'm more than committed to helping people out if they want to talk about it. And I learn through that process as well. So I think it's a two-way street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. We have time for a couple of questions. First one, right there. Go ahead. So let me ask you a question, Ram. So looking at eBay and its Indian strategy, I know you're basically in the two different businesses, right? So how do you reconcile the payments versus your auction business and so on and so forth? And how do these people kind of figure out how they navigate through your organization?
So there are two things, right? Thank you. There are two pieces to this. One is the product strategy and the work that we do out of our development centers. And then we have our local business, which is eBay India. One of the things that we have seen through our data is that eBay India has been a galvanizing force for a lot of folks who want to be entrepreneurs. They're not technology entrepreneurs, but they're people who are looking to build a livelihood. And we have about 45,000 sellers on the eBay platform in India, of which 15,000 are actually selling globally. And it has created a cross-border trade business which is actually pretty active. On the payment side, we have been looking at that space for a long time, and there are some, payments is an interesting piece because it has a regulatory impact that's associated with it. So we've had to work around some of the regulation issues for supporting our eBay India business in what we do in doing that. But there are a lot of interesting payment models that are emerging, and we are constantly watching that to see what makes sense and what makes sense to bring into the country.
And just follow-on question. Yesterday, Nandan announced some of the things, capabilities of Aadhaar. Is eBay looking at that as an opportunity?
Yeah, actually, I sent a note out to my team, the day before yesterday, saying that I think it's an area that we should definitely look at. And I think there's some really exciting possibilities and use cases that come up with Aadhaar, and we're very excited to actually take a look at that. In fact, what we would, we are starting to think about is whether we should start incorporating that into our hackathons and those kinds of things. It starts to produce new ideas and use cases that may come up.
Question up here.
When do you see eBay using vernacular content on its
So the question was, when will eBay start using vernacular content on its site?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think yesterday's plenary, there was a lot of good data in terms of vernacular adoption. I think there are still a lot of challenges in terms of creation of content, searching of content, ability to do which language to actually go after. In my previous role, I ran emerging markets, and that's one of the big things we looked at was vernacular content. In fact, in some cases we saw news consumption, page views on Hindi language sites higher than our English language sites. So clearly that's, like I mentioned, the geographic shift will necessitate all of us, not just eBay, but every company here, to think about how to handle vernacular content. The challenge with that is fragmentation as well, right? When you go from one language to multiple languages, that's the challenge. Contrast I would give you is Middle East, where you have 22 countries with one language. It's easier to service that from a language perspective. It has other problems, but that comes up.
Okay, we have time for one last question. Yeah,
sure.
Beyond the kind of, you might also want to sell this, you might also want to buy this. Mm-hmm. What other kind of interesting insights that you derive from the whole set of eBay data that you have?
Yeah. So the question here was, what other insights do we derive from the eBay data? What I would encourage you to do, if there's a whole census report that we put up. It's ebay.in/census. And that is a whole report in terms of explaining what is happening in the India market. Just a quick data point, right? What we have seen is there are 4,306 unique locations in India from which people are transacting on eBay, which means they're buying and selling, right? And both domestic business and international business. And 4,306 is clearly not the top metros. These are individual cities, towns, and villages. So clearly the internet penetration, that's an indicator of internet penetration into the heartland of India. But which also speaks to the fact that people are savvy, right? They figure out, even if there is a language barrier, there is an internet barrier or a device barrier, people are figuring out ways to get online if there is value in what they see, right? I would encourage you to go and download that census report and take a look.
Do you have similar things globally?
It's www.ebay.in/census.
Our last question. We'll take one last question. Yeah.
Can you briefly touch upon opportunities that startups have to build applications over eBay APIs?
Over
the eBay base.
eBay
on eBay. Okay, Kumaresan, I think you can talk about that better than I can. Kumaresan is one of my product managers. But I think what he's referring to is that we also have a fairly rich set of APIs that we put out. And we have a whole team that supports our buyers and sellers who build tools. There were third parties who build tools on top of the eBay platform. And we are constantly looking for more of those people to come in with good use cases that they can talk to us about. And we are, and we can certainly, that's another mode of engagement as Pat suggested. Right. And we are open to doing that. As people want to come up and talk to us, we're happy to do that. Our development center is here in Bangalore. We have a development center in Chennai, which is the PayPal Development Center. And we have, over almost 2,500 engineers, product managers, etc., who are willing to come, roll up their sleeves and help out.
Thank you, Ram.